Okay, welcome everybody to. Yeah, okay, there we go. Okay, sorry about that. We had a little video thing. Okay, welcome everybody to Wall Street Reporter's next Super Stock live stream, October 13th. We got a very special. We have a new exciting format today. We're gonna have better quality internet and less interruptions. We're gonna have super investor Sean Black on by popular demand. He's going to be interviewing Jay Hutton, the CEO of VSBY, VSBLTY Group. So Sean is a major investor in the stock. He's recently become an investor. And again, Sean, maybe you can get into it. I'll let you basically, you guys can do whatever. We'll get to some audience questions. We got a lot of audience questions. I'll pop up on the screen, but essentially, I'm going to disappear. You're gonna run the show, and I'll be back later.
Okay. Thank you, Jack.
All right. See you guys.
Well, hey, Jay, welcome. A very unique experience for me, that's for sure.
For me too.
Yeah. I think the first time you and I met, I believe was over a Zoom call. When I was, doing my due diligence on the company, and you were gracious enough to, give me some time, some FaceTime, and trying to answer any questions or concerns or anything that was out there. And this is the second official face-to-face like this.
Yeah, since you're taking over Jack's territory because of his lack of internet access.
You know what? Yes, and some of the the comments and stuff like that on social media stuff are pretty darn funny. Thank goodness Jack's a good sport and takes
social media can be tough, man.
It is. Well, he assures me a new router and new stuff is ordered, and
all right,
he'll be back on his game soon. Right. But I became two things I want to say is one thing I explained to a few people when I get asked about visibility and stuff like that, and I was pretty clear with them, like, I don't work for the company. I don't get paid. I've never received a dime from you guys and that kind of stuff. And I wouldn't do that. I don't double end any of these deals. I'm strictly an investor, and so hopefully today, I can, you could explain it, the way I understood it the first time, and even the most recent events, news events, and that kind of stuff to the average guy, that just looks at it and says, hey, like, what's different? Like, I ask the question all the time and say, why? Like, as you as a CEO, why should I invest? What's unique about you guys? And I kind of broke it down. I sort of mentioned before, there's the top end of the company. And then, for someone to explain to me what the retail arm looks like, your often overlooked arm, which is the security arm. And then I have it in the third bucket, which is your IaaS, infrastructure as a service, which is pretty new. And, if you're okay starting there, just sort of the top line. And then as we go through each one, I've sort of outlined some questions that have come in from some of the viewers, some of the people myself that I know, and my own personal questions that might help paint the picture a little better for everybody.
Thank you. Yeah. So there's no doubt, I talk with our management team about what's the priority, like where do we spend our time, energy, effort, and resource. We're going into 22 planning starting in another week and a half. And my job is to guide and counsel the company in the direction I think is most strategic. And the truth is that every time I think retail is going to supplant security or vice versa, a deal shows up that sort of challenges that assumption. And we have to maintain discipline about the allocation of resources, no doubt about it. Because at this point in time, someone held a gun to my head and asked me which market was going to be bigger. The truth is, I don't know. I really, honestly, it would be easier if I did know, because you could do the appropriate allocation of energy and effort to that. But on the retail side, what's happening now is really important, and some of the soft things we're doing will lead to harder things, more definitive things. But the soft things are important. The store is becoming recognized as a medium, and it doesn't mean that it has never been a medium. It has been. It's just been an insignificant medium in the past. We're talking about $2, 2%, maybe 3% of trade spend. That's sort of inside baseball, but it's like the dollars spent to promote brand and retail in bricks and mortar is about 2% of the overall brand budget. So it's nothing. And the other pieces, the other dollars in the brand bucket, would there be a broadcast bucket, there'd be an internet bucket, there'd be a out of home bucket, there'd be a print bucket, and that's completely being disrupted right now, Sean, because broadcast is dead. You don't get ROI from buying a Super Bowl commercial. You just don't, man. And you know, there's other ways to reach that audience that are more effective. Print is dead, even deader than broadcast. The internet has been the only place that has consumed these media dollars. And I know that in your ecosystem, you have brand people, and they'll tell you, we spend 80% of our brand dollars on internet impressions. Why? More than anything, it's because it's measurable.
Yeah, because I was going to say recently, in the last sort of 5-10 years, would you say, like, in my world where, you know, it was so tough to measure, the only way I could measure is like, did the cash register sing is always our, you know, the terminology we used in our world. And, you know, I would say in the last 5-10 years, the only two things that have probably come out have been, say, Google ads, you know what I mean? And then, you know, the kind of the pay-per-click, right? See if people click through.
There's a direct correlation then, no guesswork.
Yeah.
So if we could do that for retail, we'd have something, right? You'd have a tiger by the tail.
That's right.
And so computer vision is doing that. Computer vision it's the closest thing to click-through rate, CTR. Right?
Yeah.
I know that a 25-year-old woman sat in front of the Diet Coke for 13 and a half seconds, and 7 minutes later, a 25-year-old woman bought a Diet Coke. We measure those two pieces, right?
Because me as a retailer, if you as the provider of that service could actually tell me that, you got me.
That's
like,
it.
Right there, I'm like,
I'm
getting my pen, and I'm saying, how much is it going to cost me? Because you could actually measure if whatever I'm doing worked.
You're right, and that's a component of it, but it's not all there is. And I encourage you to expand your conversation with the people in your ecosystem to validate what I'm about to say. The brands are interested, in fact, desperate for an intimate relationship with their customer. They want to disintermediate. They want to remove the retailer from the relationship with their customer, because they know that if they can do that, they can engender loyalty. We talk about brand trust, brand belief. Those are monetizable components at the moment. So if Procter & Gamble can develop relationships with 10, 15, 25% of their customers, that's way better than they've had before, and they want to do that. So our technology creates a stepping off point for them to not only monetize that impression, but create the beginnings of a loyalty engagement.
Yeah.
And this is what changes the game. I'll give you a quick example. Our friends in Latin America, who I like to talk about, Anheuser-Busch, they have this notion of what they call a golden record. No, I'm kidding. I'm sitting in a meeting and I hear them talking about golden record. And I've never heard that phrase before. So I finally, because I don't mind appearing stupid from time to time, it happens with greater frequency.
I'm good at
it. What is a golden record? A golden record, Sean, is an email or a phone number. So if I can create a unique creative activation in retail where I exchange something of value for something of value with you, Sean Black, you're going to give me your phone number.
Yeah.
You're going to do it. And that once that's done, I now have a direct relationship with my consumer. The retailer is now irrelevant. He's out of the mix. I'm not going to say that he's going to go away. He's not going to go away. But now he's not between me and my consumer. Now I can market directly when that guy's not in the store. Or that
data capture, right? Like that data capture is huge. But then also I would believe, sorry to interrupt you, but like the cost of acquisition of that customer is so expensive to get them the first time. But once you have them, it's so much cheaper to keep them.
They pay $7 for a golden record. One. That's the CTR. That's the equivalent to a CTR.
Okay. Now I got it. You know what I mean? Because like in my world, I knew the click-through was important. I knew you had to pay more. I knew to capture any data about your consumer was gold. So here you are doing both those things and connecting them into one ecosystem, you know what I mean, and within the store. And like I said, I had some friends from the Mars Corporation and, even some friends I know that are executives at Pepsi that are investors in VSBLTY. Because as soon as they connected the dots that what you were doing, which was, into monetizing the shelf space as well and monetizing that retail environment, they knew it was, in their world, it was gold. You know what I mean? Because they said, like, normally, like, what do they put up? A cling on the window. They put up something that's a static. They get no feedback. They have
fire and forget. Fire and forget. Yeah.
And it's 3 to 6 months before he ever gets that data back. He has no idea if it worked. He goes, but if I can pivot and change my ad and, and on the fly, he goes, like, that's money you want. He said, versus, being, 2 miles down the road from a C store saying, hey, when you stop by, get your case of beer at, on sale. You're getting them at point of purchase. It's equivalent of, like I said, I remember reading an article about Jerry Jones getting more money for the naming rights of his end zones than any other NFL team was getting in the entire naming of the building, because that real estate in front of cameras, in front of eyes, is worth so much money. So, I sort of understood early on what you were up to. But, and to your credit, one of the things you told me at our first call, and I mentioned this before to Jack, but you said, I get it. Like, people want to see us go, definitive. They want to see real contracts, forecastable revenue. And you sort of did that in the moment you went and got a deal done with Anheuser-Busch. And so, you of course, we mentioned a lot. How the heck do you not? But I believe that's just the tip of the iceberg, of where you're at with them, and where it could go, with store count and inventory. And what does that look like? When you see them, like, what do they get the most excited about? Like, what's the feedback you're receiving from their side? That, when you started to work together?
I've got to be careful not to disclose any of their strategic elements, because they get super, it's just a big deal for them.
Yeah.
And so they keep me under their thumb a little bit on how much and how broadly I can speak about this. But in general, they're looking at collecting all data that comes from the C store. And some of that data is consumer data, some of it's merchandising data, and some of it, believe it or not, Sean, is operating data.
Okay.
So on this network that we're building right now in Latin America, we're actually going to be putting the point of sale on that network. Makes so sense. That you can do correlations between display and velocity. And we also have object recognition capabilities, Sean. So we can stare at a cooler with a camera, and we can tell you if that cooler is out of stock on items 1, 3, 7, and 5.
And that's becoming huge. From everything I read, that is like, if operational efficiencies, they're all desperate for. If you can save them, some man hours or out of stock items, or, find efficiencies in the field where they don't have to send a guy out on the road to do it.
Talk to your friends at PepsiCo or Red Bull or Coca-Cola or Budweiser about something called DSD. DSD is direct store delivery. Most of the market works under the context of DSD. In the morning, a guy gets in a truck, loads it up with product, and drives to 17 stores. Sometimes he'll go to a store that doesn't need product. Sometimes he'll go to a store that's needed product for 4 days. There's no programmatic way to make that more efficient.
Yeah. So
let's just use the cameras we're deploying anyway. Just start looking at product as well as people, and inform that driver before he gets on the road. So we're talking about, Sean, if we do this right, if we thread the needle right, we've got offense, ad dollars, and we got defense, operational efficiencies. Well, and if you could capture ABI's vision, that's the vision.
Because you're really embedded in their ecosystem. Like, you're very
immovable.
Immovable. Because you control. You're understanding their shelf space. You're understanding the turns in the place. You're understanding their safety. You're understanding what's working. And also, the point I mentioned earlier from the start was that correlation between whatever ad I'm running and whatever goes into the cash register. So that part, for me as a retailer, would be gold across everywhere.
But now you've got a new dimension to POS. Now you've got a demographic dimension to your point of sale. You don't just know a product was sold. You know roughly to which demographic it was sold, which is very valuable.
If you want, and I would assume also that would lead into your, the way your deal is structured, which is, I believe incredible. But how you can then monetize your advertising dollars, because you'll know that it worked. You'll know who you should be advertising to in that city, in that particular region, what the demographic is. They can point their ads to, to get more clicks, based on what's in that area.
If I promote this kind of drink, Saturdays between 1 and 7, I know the velocity upticks by 35%. So now I'm going to take that proposition. Anybody that wants to have that space in the beverage category is now going to pay a premium for that space because I've connected it to demonstrable and archival velocity.
You just created the fish finder.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So like it's like the Garmin, you know what I mean? Like because before when we were fishing, it was in the dark, right? And now you've taken it for a retailer to say, I've got a fish finder. I'll tell you where the fish are, what kind of fish it is. You know what I mean? Like you've basically done that for retail. If I could put it
and the software challenge is to take these disparate data sets, ingest them in a rules engine. We call it a spine or an engine, and draw meaning from it. They're different and disparate data sets. You got to visualize them in a way that's meaningful to the retailer. And that's the unique part of us. Yeah, we're excited about our computer vision and algorithms. That's cool and kick ass. But the ability to take this into a rules engine and make it meaningful to a retailer or a brand is, I think, where this is going. Which
is incredible. So, and I've posted this before, but I've literally said, like, you've taken your tech and you've made it from a science project and figured out how to monetize it. And so many people that never get it to that, to that equation, but to somehow use it and make your ecosystem allow you to door entry, like get through the door with partners like Anheuser-Busch and them, but not just as a customer. Anybody can offer to pay them, but offer to be partners with them and a seat at the table. It shows you how much they're valuing it. That's the part I don't see any other micro cap that I'm invested in today that it has the level of partners. I think I read it was like 7 different partners that are multi-billion-dollar companies that you're at the table with, which is incredible.
And it's honestly, this is the moment of honesty. It's not easy. They want you captive, right? They want you in their camp and only their camp.
They never share,
right? So it's the challenge of, and we have active deals right now that they'd prefer us not to do, right? But sorry, we're
building that. Right, yeah, for sure. And so Jay, when you look at your retail arm, today the one silo that you have, Anheuser-Busch today is by far your biggest customer, the biggest driver of that footprint you have today. And obviously, you said Mexico, Latin America, that kind of stuff you've done. One of the things that I just about fell off my chair when I was reading a couple of days ago, your video you did, and it stated that there are pieces to your agreement that could expand into, based on hitting certain milestones, Africa, Europe, and I had to actually look this up to understand what it meant when you said APAC. And I was like, what is he? So you're quick with the lingo, but I wasn't sure. So when I actually read what Asia Pacific and Africa and Europe entailed, like that market alone, do you understand what do you know what that population is?
I do.
I would assume you understand what the addressable market might be.
Yeah,
in a market
it's
like
huge.
That.
It's huge. And we're not talking about a small microbrew that's got 3% market share either. We're talking about guys that have the weakest market share they have is in the Malaysia area at 60%, Sean. That's the weakest market share they have across across APAC. And by the way, I'll try to avoid acronyms in the future. I do have a tendency to.
I know, but I was literally like, what did you say? Like, I was like, I literally had to Google. I'll admit, somebody made money on that ad because I clicked through and found out what APAC was. So, I thought that was pretty incredible. So that is like the current agreement you have, the milestones are there and laid out, and I've posted it several times, but it shows 5,000 stores, 10,000, 15,000, how you reach milestones. It provides them optionality to participate and actually acquire an interest in visibility, which is pretty impressive. I think it gets them up to about 9% of the float.
Not coincidentally, 9.9. Yeah.
No, I know. There's the reporting requirements and stuff like that, so that's great. And Jay, one of the markets that when I looked at that total market, it was about 200 that you've done so far, about 250 million people. Obviously, APAC and Africa and stuff like that. If that's where it expands to next, is pretty big. And I know you sort of the one thing that was interesting though, when I went back and looked at those agreements, Ambev is the biggest kind of driver of that. The way I see it in those markets, and they're based out of Sao Paulo. So I obviously doing my homework and reading on it, and I'm like, holy crap, the biggest addressable market. There's 212 million people in Brazil. You know what I mean? So I'm not assuming you have a deal done or anything like that, but is that a desirable market for you guys? And what would you, like in that market, would you know how many coolers there are and that kind of stuff?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, Ecuador, I think, is about 9 million people.
Mm-hmm.
In Ecuador, Sean, these numbers just staggering to me. In Ecuador, ABI has on the balance sheet, this is coolers they own.
Yeah.
I'm just talking about the cooler category for now. 61,000 coolers on the balance sheet in Ecuador.
In Ecuador.
So let's just assume it's a linear, right?
Yeah.
And we go to Brazil. They've got, what would that be? 20 times as many?
Yeah.
You've got and in the US, just as a comparable, Coca-Cola has 21 million coolers on the balance sheet just in the US. That's not counting Pepsi or any of the beer companies.
Yeah, because Embera, like one of their biggest actual production facilities is in Brazil, where they
have Brazil, they have Colombia, and they have Guadalajara, Mexico.
That's right.
But
I know it's a major footprint for them as well in that area, obviously with Embera.
And they're part of the FEMSA group of companies, Sean.
Yes, I read that.
Right. So they're in the beverage ecosystem.
That's right. When I read it, and just so you understand, when I was peeling back the layers on the onion, in this part, I was like, wait a second. So I understood Embera, and then I dug in on Ambev, and then I understood who controlled the pouring rights. You know, I call it, there's pouring rights,
right.
And then there's the which is, you know, the Cokes, the Pepsis, that kind of stuff. And when I understood the market share of some of these guys, like the Coke guys control about 60% of the market in that area. You know what I mean? And it's interesting. Some of them control the rights to Pepsi as well. Some of them control different things. But the FEMSA group, like I was like literally falling off my chair when I realized like who owned Embera and what that connection, you know, kind of went up as you go up the ladder and you go up the food chain. Because Embera, in my opinion, it's a monster company. I had no idea that it was actually owned by a much bigger company, and it was one of a million things they own. That was very surprising to me.
I'm not going to represent that we've got everyday meetings with FEMSA about our domination plans, but I can tell you that the vision that Embera has is aggressive, and it's very FEMSA centric, if you know what I mean.
Exactly, but I would understand that they're not going to give up market share. Like, you know, I mean, Embera is a monster, right? So like I was reading about where they were, where they're based, and that's where for sure I was digging in on, you know, like sides of the prize. And in my opinion, if you're in those markets and you were to potentially add a fifth market, people ask me, which one do you think it is? I said, well, do you either go a mile wide and an inch deep, or, you know, you're already in that market and it's their home base. They're not going to concede that market. No chance in heck.
When we were negotiating the contract with them, and, you know, these guys are legendary. Everybody will tell you about how difficult a negotiator ABI is. And I'm here to tell you that that's absolutely true. However, we were able to score some wins. And among the difficult topics during the sort of, you know, the third quarter of the game was Brazil. Yeah. We said to them, you have no immediate plans for Brazil. So why do you want that carved out? Yeah. Well, it's our home field advantage. That's where we grew up. Our current CEO, Carlos Brito, is Brazilian. And, you know, we said, well, you're going to have plans for Brazil, tangible plans. Otherwise, you're going to lose the right to be the first mover. I can't tell you specifically where they are because that's a part of the contract that's redacted at the moment. But yes, Brazil is important to them.
Yes, I mean, like simple math, and as I dug in, and the Embera connection, the Ambev connection, all those pieces, there's no way in heck they're going to let that market go to anybody else.
It's a hard market, though. It's legendary for its difficult entry, but they're in already, so it makes it easier.
Yeah, they're in, and they got a footprint. But also, I believe the security piece would be pretty big there, Jay. I believe, you know, I mean, you're a component to that market for their stores, and like if they have, you know, Modelorama has a presence in that market, and I would assume there's probably a pretty significant Modelorama presence in Brazil. Do you have any? Would you know how many stores they have in Brazil?
Modelorama has no stores in Brazil, Sean. But Modelorama is a Mexican brand bought from a family company, maybe a half a dozen years ago, making the third largest. Richest person in Mexico as a result of that transaction. But in Brazil, they have other assets.
Okay.
just not Modelorama assets.
Okay. All right. But I figured with that being home base, for sure they're going to do the same thing. They're going to control shelf space everywhere. You know what I mean? Like they're going to know what the consumers have access to consumers. And which
remember, and maybe this hasn't been clear in earlier conversations, but they are a retailer for sure. But their strategy is integrated supply and logistics. So they supply all SKUs for north of 1 million stores in Central and South America right now. Just think about that for a moment. Everything that is supplied to those stores, whether it's ABI or Heineken, their fierce enemy, is supplied through the logistics support of ABI. So you've got a very unique relationship with them. It's even a mobile app, Sean, where you, Sean Black, the impresario in Quito, Ecuador, can order Pepsi office mobile app. So they've got their tentacles into every independent operator in almost the entire footprint.
And 1 million plus stores?
Over 1.1 million in under a year, which is remarkable to me.
Wow. Okay. So that was certainly of interest. You know, and I go and one of the next ones, Jay, when I looked at the retail piece and the relationships you have. So obviously that one has, to me, simple math. Like as you hit your stores, the milestones are laid out in your agreements, whatever parts you guys have disclosed so far. One of the next ones that I had on a retail piece here to ask about was, especially when you're in, you know, a major hub and you have other deals, you know, Atlanta obviously is becoming a bit of a hub for you. You know what I mean? Like, you know, obviously I know Intel's got a major office there. Your recent EV deal, you know what I mean, is out of Atlanta. Can you maybe expand on it, you know, I guess how that all came together and what you see, you know, Atlanta becoming for you guys?
I gotta be, so you would imagine, I think, that innovation doesn't necessarily happen always from that big red brand in Atlanta. Yeah. It can also happen in their bottler network. And their bottler network, although they've done a lot of repurchasing of bottlers over the last 20 years, there's still a couple of very large independent operators that are doing innovation by themselves with the consent and participation of the big brand, but they do it by themselves, right? So we're not necessarily Atlanta centric, even as it relates to Coca-Cola. There are things that can be done in their ecosystem without the involvement of Atlanta, not without their consent, but without their direct involvement.
Oh yeah, and I did like I mentioned before. You know, I know a lot about Coke, and one of my friends and neighbors is the CFO of Coke. They control the bottling rights for Canada. So I did reach out to him, Ashley, and ask him, you know what I mean, like what they're, you know, if he sees this stuff. And I did ask him all the important markets that are bottler markets in the United States, because their partner in Canada is actually one of the biggest bottlers in the United States. So yes, I was poking away at him yesterday and saying, hey, where are the key bottling markets? Which one's done, you know, corporate control? And so anyways, it was an interesting conversation, you know, and it opens up a ton of stuff out there. But when I look at Atlanta, though, you've done an EV deal. Yeah. But I also, you know, I am waiting for the other shoe to drop on your DIY piece. And there's a big orange guy that happens to be based in Atlanta that I would assume, you know, as well. I look at it from a real estate play. They've got a ton of parking lot space. They're all looking for ways to attract people in, and you just happen to do an EV deal that, you know, is there. And I would think that there'd be a lot of real estate available in, you know, Home Depot parking lots that happen to be based out of Atlanta.
EV is fascinating to me. I wouldn't pretend to know everything there is to know about that marketplace, but there's the tactical deal we've just done with EOS. There's another deal that could be more accurately characterized as development to optimize the solar generation ecosystem, which has security components to it, IoT components to it, all these components, which I think is even more fascinating than the EV stuff. But just on the EV stuff, the current President Biden is saying that by the year 2030, 50% of vehicles on the road will be EV vehicles. The infrastructure isn't even close to being ready for that.
Yeah.
So we've got an opportunity here to, you know, pick a couple of players and innovate with them right alongside them.
Yeah, I read a story this morning about saying about, like, you know, they have these ambitious goals and that kind of stuff, but they say, what about people live in the cities? Like when they want to park on the streets and stuff, they don't get to park their car like at home, right? So there's going to be a major charging problem for, you know, for all these EV vehicles that don't have a home base.
one of the things I didn't realize, and it was made known to me by our EOS, our solar partner, was that, you know, when they select a location for a charging station, and this is why there's only 500 on the map right now, because when they go in, they then have to pay for all the grid upgrade that needs to happen to ensure that you can run 10 220-volt charging stations.
That's right.
It's not ready.
That's why when Home Depot is always trying to monetize their real estate, every time I've seen it, like one of the biggest challenges is bringing power, sewer, septic, whatever they're going to bring to that property. It's a real problem for them to bring infrastructure to the property because it was only designed for the Home Depot building.
Right, exactly.
It was never meant to
use
as other than a parking lot. So I definitely understand that. But I think that's great, and I think there's a footprint that you're starting, obviously, in Atlanta, and that you're going to be recognized. And I quite like that deal. I didn't see that one coming. Of all the ones that I thought you might have had in the works, that was a real surprise to me. But but obviously, do understand, like you said, Coke and Home Depot and Intel all happen to have offices in Atlanta. So I hope, I know you're a big Mets fan, but you may have to watch, a lot of
a little bit of Braves,
a lot of Braves baseball.
Okay.
So on that side, coming up, then when you break into the security side, so I understand some of the retail side, some of the thesis. I know DIY and drug you haven't got into yet, but at some point in time, I expect to hear something on that. But on the security side, can you kind of walk a little bit through what you guys do, and maybe start off with Radar app, and we'll go down like some of the key partners you have and what you think is going to be something investors can look forward to?
Sure. It started with Radar app back in maybe 2017. They built and they were and are an energy company that developed efficiency. So you have a factory and you want to have a more efficient use of lighting. The example would be, if there's no one in the factory, why do you have the lights on? So motion detection that would optimize lighting, just as a very basic example. Then they built a very rudimentary mobile application meant to deploy in neighborhoods. Camera networks that would allow for people to share video with one another for the purposes of protecting neighborhoods. Long story short, that became fairly significant. It deployed first in Coahuila County, which was at that time the most dangerous county in Mexico City. Of the 10 counties in Mexico City, it was the most dangerous. And in 6 months, it became the safest. I suspect there's a myriad of reasons that occurred, but chief among them is the deployment of a AI capable CCTV network that was able to sort of predict or anticipate crime and be able to address that in a very effective and intelligent way. They then expanded to 7,000 to 10,000 cameras in the next 24 to 48 months. And we then used that as an example of the stuff we could do together. Intel came in, evaluated it, made some changes here and there, and basically agreed that we would take this globally with us. What Intel calls their consumption sales force, which is all the people globally that are responsible for taking validated solutions, which this one was now, and Intel validated Intel's reference architecture. It uses as much Intel as you could possibly use. And then that becomes now an Intel saleable product. And that formed the basis of Radar app, and actually formed the basis of one of the business units inside AGIS, Austin GIS, the new entity. That entity has security as a service, which is exactly what we did in Mexico. It has retail analytics as a service. You know what that is.
Yep.
It has smart device as a service, making a dumb camera a smart camera. And it has 5G as a service. We, VSBLTY, are at the core of 3 of those 4 major offerings. And their principal business objective is never to pursue a deal worth less than $200 million. So they're in the infrastructure game. Yep. And they want to build big smart city infrastructure, surveillance infrastructure. And Sean, as a quick sort of preview to the fourth quarter, our biggest deal in the security space in the fourth quarter will be a deal that we probably won't be able to talk about too much. It's a sovereign government. It's a very large deployment. It's actually one of the largest in the Western Hemisphere. And it's deployed through the group that I just described.
Okay.
So
I believe
really excited.
Because the fact that you guys have I don't know, I call you guys the hub of the wheel, right? You guys are but you also control some of the spokes which are pretty incredible, and you're participating in revenue across all of them,
like media as a spoke, right?
That's right. Media as a spoke, SaaS as a spoke, IaaS as a spoke. That's what I don't know how that you got your fingers in some of those. I actually don't know how you negotiate that part, but it's pretty incredible because it monetizes your stuff at, like, you're getting paid multiple times.
It accelerates. Yeah, it does. Yeah,
it is. And it catches up really quick. And, so that's the Radar app piece. And obviously now you've announced a piece where you're coming to the US with that, your Radar USA.
Yeah. So, we were able to identify to the partners in AGIS our desire to build basically a systems integrator that more than anything integrates our own stuff. We VSBLTY are disciplined and focused on building really good world-class software. So we don't focus on the necessary pieces to deploy into a municipality. But it does make sense for us to play a pivotal role in creating such an entity, which is exactly what we did. Radar app and VSBLTY got together. We were able to secure some external financing. We're providing leadership and guidance, but no management for Radar USA to go after the marketplaces that we help them articulate. We'll support them just like we support any channel that we have. Mm-hmm. And we cut them a super good guy deal on the licensing, $2 million upfront licensing for the first baseline of licenses, and a special relationship with us going forward. We carved out some specific marketplaces for them. And I think that the marketplace, they're already in revenue. They've signed 2 deals and there's going to be more.
So that's beyond near term. That's like already in motion, which is another spoke on the wheel, right? Which I like. So then, Jay, there's the 911 piece. I think it's pretty cool. Which piece, especially with the first responder piece, which we talked about. Maybe could you just touch on that so people understand?
Sure. The use case is principally, not exclusively, because things are changing. Sean, you and I have spoken about the potential negative connotation around facial recognition at the moment. So we're just going to be intelligent and avoid the mess. We're going to stay out of that.
Yeah.
But artificial intelligence can also be used to identify objects of note. And the objects that are most interesting, certainly in the retail context, you can imagine that there'd be a certain set of objects there. A can of Pepsi versus a bottle of Pepsi, as an example. Yep. But in security, the most noteworthy or most interesting object to be recognized is a weapon, right? So we have very advanced weapons technology that can identify handgun, long gun, knife from distance as well. And we've developed that to be sold into probably mostly police departments where there's social headwinds against facial recognition, but not necessarily social headwinds against weapons detection, right?
Yeah, the threat detection would be a big piece, which I think as well as rapid SOS, which is one of them.
That, right. And so when you identify a weapon, what then do you do?
Yeah.
In a police department context, you'll direct it to the real-time crime center. Every major PD has one. You'll verify it with a human being. So the software informs but doesn't decide. That's important. So I don't have liability. Mm-hmm. It just informs. Person decides, yeah, that's a weapon. Dispatch people, right? So alert, weapon validated, dispatch. That's the workflow in the PD.
The remote monitoring piece from city protection, stuff like that, like, it's the only way that can get efficiency's got to come into play. It's the only way it's going to get done. So
you cannot hire enough people to look at 18,000 cameras in Philadelphia, for example. You have to have software to do some of the work.
And JD, is that like what's the timeline you see where that's in that spoke is in revenue?
We're piloting this quarter, and I would expect at the back end of this quarter we'll start to announce some revenue deals. We've got more than one pilot already underway.
So that's
but the other part of that,
Sean,
the other part of that, just really quickly, is weapons detection in a building context is slightly different. If I have exterior cameras that identify a weapon approaching the building, mm-hmm. I can engage in a workflow that is proscriptive. I can shut all the doors. I can lock all the doors.
Which is huge for schools and everything that's out there.
It's tangibly going to save lives.
And would that come in where, is that where you sort of introduce the Johnson Controls part to the relationship?
We're talking about that. It would be wrong of me to suggest that that's done and locked and loaded, but they've recently fallen out of love with their facial recognition investment.
Yeah.
So we're going to take advantage of that if we can.
From a security standpoint, like they are involved in a lot of buildings and
they are. Smart buildings infrastructure is a big part of it, especially when you can connect it to workflow. You can do something with that data, which is what 911 Inform and Rapid SOS give to us. And the first places where we're having success is in the religious houses of worship category, where there's a tangible problem, right? So, and that's in revenue already.
Which is, like the fact that you're in, we call it beta testing, call it pilot. I didn't realize it was that near term, that it was already there. And it just adds to another catalyst that, I think it would, again, makes it hard to understand that you have this many revenue opportunities, companies this small, but all funnels down, right? So it's pretty significant.
The reason why that's doable is we approach it from a partner's perspective. We're not looking for visibility to do all the hand holding. We're just we support our channels, and our channels do the work.
And I would think that, the recent one you announced, I was very impressed that you somehow you got HCL and Tech Mahindra to sit at the same table and, share a conversation. It's like getting Pepsi and Coke to, be partners on a deal in a JV. Is that where I noticed one of the conferences you guys have coming up is in India. And is that where, my assumption would be, you got partners like, I think HCL and, but Tech Mahindra mainly, to walk you through the door. And I'm sure that they would have, needs, use cases and, seeing what you're doing over here and want to leverage it, within their own customer base in India. And I would assume that's probably a pretty good door opener, a conversation starter.
There's momentum in India. We are under the cone of silence on it at the moment, and probably will be for a few months. But yes, those are all reasonable assertions. These guys are extremely well-regarded Indian companies. Yeah, there's conflict between the two of them, but what we've done is, under the auspices of Austin GIS, they've each been given a specific lane.
Okay, makes sense.
And that way we can avoid, they participate as a matter of governance, equally, but they've each been given a specific lane and a requirement, which may not have been disclosed in their disclosure, a requirement to bring a certain amount of value to the JV over.
Well, yeah, and even just in your relationship with the ABI deal, it certainly screamed to me I'm like, geez, well, if your partners are, and if you're I call partners working partners or something like that, there's going to be enormous opportunity in India. And then all of a sudden, I see you guys doing a conference over there. I'm like, that obviously is an area of focus for probably 2022 to start planting those seeds and plant some trees in the market in India, which is, just an observation on my part. Obviously nothing was out there, but then the Austin GIS piece obviously is, I think it's understated to get at the table with all those guys, to be an equal partner with a Fortune 50 company is, pretty impressive. I think, again, opens up opportunities that you probably have no idea what they even are. Like I said, you might not be able to speak about some of them, but 2022 likely brings, some further near-term catalysts that, are going to require you, from scaling up and distribution, which all are pretty interesting.
As we execute, the number of choices and opportunities available to us, expand 20-fold.
Especially if you have more results. Like one of the gentlemen was on from Intel. You did a recent live event with him. He used an example. I think it was like 20 or 25 or 23%, something like that, saying that when your stuff's being used, you're seeing an immediate impact of 20, 25%, with your technology being used in the C-stores. I have to believe that as you gather more results, you're going into a meeting now with irrefutable evidence that whatever you have works.
Yeah. So that's only one metric too, right? Sales velocity, sales lift, that's one metric. Remember the whole data metric,
yes,
which the brands are equally, if not arguably more interested in than the velocity metric.
It's pretty big though when you have somebody from an Intel executive position.
Intel's been enormous support. I think Intel, to their credit, recognizes the fact that we're ahead. Mm-hmm. And we are also Intel. We're a big driver of Intel chipsets. So that's what's in it for them.
Yeah. And I knew early on, there's no way you were getting supply unless, you had a pretty friendly relationship, because those things that you talk about gold right now. Chip,
Well, yeah. We've got supply. We currently have a ship sitting off of Long Beach, just outside of LA, that's got a bunch of our stuff on it. So we're waiting for a berth.
Well, that's great. You know what I mean? But it certainly leads to, future opportunity and stuff like that. When you have, Intel, bridging relationships for you, you've got Tech Mahindra bridging relationships for you, and allowing you to probably tackle projects that you would never dreamed of 5 years ago.
Never dreamed of. You're exactly right.
Yeah. And especially when you can connect it and show people how to monetize, to me, it's one of your things it says on there, like you're providing actionable insights. Like, I think that's, it's immediate, like actionable, which doesn't matter whether it's security, whether it's sales, the fact that you're providing actionable insights is pretty impressive. And I think you're only at the start of monetizing it. And that's why I laugh. Like, I don't know how the heck, originally this came across my desk as an opportunity, and seeing it on Jack's show, or, having some other people I know that invested or brought it to my attention, I was like, how is this possible? You know what I mean? Like, and you were the first one to say, like, hey, listen, until I deliver definitive agreements and stuff like that, I get it. You're like, I've got to, the rubber's got to meet the road, sort of thing. But I just believe now that you've got definitive agreements, and then you start getting results. And Jay, one of the big ones you touched on, and I think it was like an eye opener. I believe 99.9% of the people had no idea what you said the first time. But can you explain the 14 when you said 14 to 1, when you talked about billable? Because I think, these days right now, your company, I believe, is judged basically on news releases and potential. But those things over the next 2, 3, 4 quarters are going to start becoming very measurable, in my opinion, based on the results.
We're searching for the right way of communicating our core metrics. I have a brand new CFO, which I'm sort of delighted to have around, because he's experienced Pubco before, worked at Oracle in a senior position. I'm really delighted to have him, Mitch Codkind. He joined us about 2 months ago, and we have this conversation almost every day, which is, what are the proper metrics to communicate to the marketplace, the meaningful way of measuring the company's success. And there's only 2 right now, but we're searching for more. We're searching for more meaningful ones, and we'll find them. But there's revenue, aka billings, and there's bookings. Bookings are a leading indicator. They are the composite of your total contracts signed in the quarter. So we communicate the total contracts signed in the quarter being X. At the end of the year, we'll communicate that as an aggregate, quarter over quarter. And on a quarterly basis, we'll also speak about the revenue. Now, in order for revenue to be recognized in the SaaS world, we have a little bit of hardware that we have in our business. I'm trying to diminish that over time, but for now, hardware exists to some degree in our business because of the desire of our customers to acquire everything from one source.
Yeah, keep turnkey.
Right. So that once that hardware ships, the best news about hardware is that it's immediately recognizable as revenue.
Okay.
When we book a contract for software as a service, it might be a 24-month contract that's worth $1,000 a month, just to make it really simple. The rules require me to recognize that money can go into the total contract value, 24 times 1,000. That's the total contract value. But I don't get the 1,000 recognized as revenue until we've deployed that and it becomes a rear view mirror item. So revenue is technically a trailing indicator, and TCV, total contract value, or bookings, is a leading indicator. So if you want to look at the health of the company, you're looking at the TCV. You should be looking at the TCV.
Yeah, no, it is a rearview mirror shot. Now, unfortunately, not unfortunately, but for a lot of investors that are early into this, I think a lot of them have to have something to look at. You know what I mean? Because they want to see that you're growing, right? Although it's a rearview lens, they want to see growth.
Quarter over quarter growth, and hopefully as significant as possible.
That's right. You know what I mean? And if you look at it, 40% year over year growth. Hyper growth, and anything over 40% is, you're entering unicorn status, especially if it's sustainable. It's not just a blip on the screen. And I certainly believe you're going to achieve that in 2022. And as investors, if I was, I'm looking at it, I tell guys like, hey, for right now, look at their pipeline, Like, look at the deals they have. Can they execute on it? What's the realistic chance? And if they start to demonstrate that they are executing, then start to look at the numbers as you enter 2022 and say, great, what's that? Bookings to billings, and our billings, you look at it that way, and then actually look at what shows up on the balance sheet, at the end of each quarter.
Yeah. And the marketplace has a similar point of view with a slightly different, maybe more skewed approach. My peer group and the folks that sit above us in the category are now looking at us as a legitimate candidate. We're now getting acquisitive conversations that we never had before. We get opportunities to acquire that we've never had before. I'm not saying that we're looking at any of those. Right. I just
$5 minimum, Jay.
Right. Well, so, but I don't say that because there's any kind of pride in that. I mean, if you're not, it's like my old man used to tell me, if you're not getting headhunted, then you should be worried. Yeah.
Well, that's a fair statement. I think any young company should, because
right.
like if with your partner network that you have already, like other than scaling, like you're in execution mode, right? Like,
right.
And now you're probably in a point where, a little while ago, you would have been just happy somebody called you. You know what I mean? They'd be interested in and showing some interest. And now you're probably like, you'd be a little more selective, and start
and skeptical and like, okay, show me why this is a better deal than the one I got going. Right.
Like you said, to remove my eyes off this, you got to have something really good.
Right.
And so I'm sure you're going to start saying no to some opportunities, which probably early on you didn't, right? You probably just tried to become a switchblade and figure out Swiss Army knife, sort of figure out how to. We
had the discipline to say no early to a big acquirer, and sure glad we did, because it was a fraction of our current market cap.
And I certainly experienced those moments as well.
Yeah.
And, I have exited a couple times some business with my partners, and early on, I thank goodness there was some guys that came to try and buy us, and it was like laughable now when you look back what they tried to offer. Nobody ever wants to pay, the forward value. And I posted a quote the other day. A multi-billionaire hedge fund manager said, don't look at what it is today. It's like, what is this going to be worth in 18 months from now? And decide if you want to be in it. If it's got the growth, and does it meet your objectives? And there's a reason why right now, like, you're straddling number one or number two every day in my portfolio of investments. First, it's my conviction and belief in you. And then, because so far since I've met you, every single thing you said was reasonable. You didn't, pump the crap out of it and say, I'm going to, own the world. You just, in one of the first meetings you said to me was, let me, I get it. Let me show that, deliver what I don't know
if I said this to you before, Sean, but my first boss, 27 years old, I was in a real company, and had close proximity to the boss, and I was responsible for doing a bunch of special projects for him. And he was a public company CEO. And he said to me, being a public company CEO is actually really simple. You only need to do three things. Tell people what you're going to do it, and then remind them what you did. That's my ethos.
And you know what? Like, when it comes to trusting or respecting a CEO as an investor from my side, that's what I'm looking for. You know what I mean? Like, I understand sometimes there might be a disconnect in the market, like for the stock's not the company kind of thing. But see, for me, I have to stay laser focused on the CEO, and is he executing and delivering on what he promised?
Yeah.
And so far in my time since I think when I have 46 cents when I started participating in the company. And I know it was during the summertime, and honestly, it was pretty friggin' lonely. I thought I was on an island. I was the only one buying your stock for quite a while. I was like, what am I missing here? Like, and then I realized, and I think that was one of the first times we connected, was like, something's out of whack here. Like, somebody's not getting what you guys have. And you were the first one to say, hey, let me deliver definitive agreements. Then I hope people start believing me that we're for real. And I believe that's what's happened. And that's why you're here today.
Chipping away.
The share price is here today. So for you, what you've done, I want to say thank you. Thank you for your time. I think it was great to walk through some typical investor type questions, and a ton of these did come in from the audience that directly sent them to me. And I hope you keep executing, because I always say, like, I have a face made for radio. So if you can keep making me look good in the investment world, Jay, I thank you.
No,
it's not easy to do, and hopefully for yourself, you guys get the reward, and your team does as well for the hard work you guys are doing.
I appreciate the time. An hour. That's unbelievable. I guess we can owe that to Jack's crappy internet.
Yes. Thanks, Jack, very much for providing the opportunity. All right. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jay.